super bummed about this. No idea what's going on with my good mic. I'll have to have that fixed by the next stream. But we'll try and see what we can do here. The Mount Rushmore of sports. This gets brought up a lot now that we're really debating the greatness of LeBron James in respect to Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and some of the other greats. You'll hear a lot of the arguments that the GOAT conversation heavily lies in the generation of the person talking about it. And it's 100% true. You know, people my dad's age would argue that Michael Jordan was the greatest ever, and I can't argue that. I believe that. You'll find a lot of modern day fans argue LeBron James' side, and I see the merits for it. But Michael Jordan was the greatest. Babe Ruth was the greatest. Wayne Gretzky's the greatest. I don't know that it would take a lot for someone to come along to change that narrative. Mike Trout right now is changing that narrative as the greatest player ever. It's just unfortunate that his career will not include the accolades that players like Babe Ruth acquired in his tenure. You know, that organization has had a really rough time fielding a competitive team during his tenure there. And let's be honest, he has like another 5 to 7 peak years left before a drop off. And if he doesn't nab himself a couple of championships during that time, I think himself and everyone involved, and anyone who's a sports fan, would really feel bad about that. You know, it'd be a real big bummer. Um, so you'll never settle that argument, LeBron versus MJ, especially if LeBron wins a championship in LA or anywhere else. Or what if he wins one in LA and somewhere else? You know, he's got one more year after this year, 2 more years after this year, and then he can go anywhere. Bronny will be up in the league around that time, so maybe he tries to arrange himself to where he can go sign with whatever team drafts Bronny. I think that's something that definitely he's thought about. It had to have, at least by now. And this week we're going to do our second edition of Fix That Team. Last podcast, we reviewed the bottom three teams, which was Golden State, Minnesota, and Cleveland. This week we are fixing the next three teams in order, if I'm not mistaken. I do want to verify this. Also, breaking news: Cam Newton signs with New England. I don't know that anyone saw that coming at this point. All indicators were that they weren't interested. Is that a smokescreen? A classic Belichick smokescreen. So with the fourth pick in the NBA draft, if everything were to end today and there was no lottery, would be the Atlanta Hawks. So my goal with these is to try to fix these teams this offseason. What do I do in going forward? Atlanta, you have to let these players develop. You have to. You can't try to rush this process, even if it takes 4 or 5 years. You look at what Oklahoma City did with getting Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden. They had to let that start to brew there and turn into something. And that's what Atlanta needs to do as well. They need to let the guys they've drafted, they obviously believed in them, or else they wouldn't have drafted them. So you let these guys settle in, learn their place in the offense within the team. Trae Young is the real deal. I was skeptical when he came in the league of what if he was just a college sensation, but he is the real deal, and they can't panic if things don't go well this next year. they should be shooting for the year after that of making the next step, which is making the playoffs, winning a series, winning the East, winning a championship. So there you have to be patient. These teams try to rush these processes and they blow it up before it's ready, or they make drastic changes that um, hurt the team. Um, and they need to draft talent over need, because if you focus too much on just filling out your team, you could really miss out on a talent. And if you end up with 2-star small forwards, 2-star power forwards, 2-star shooting guards, point guards, you play to your talents, not to what tradition tells you play 1 through 5. You play with the best talent you have. That's why you see a lot of success with small ball lineups. We haven't seen a ton of success with two forwards dominate the league until recent, with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And you can't put emphasis on having too much wing help, especially because those guys tend to have the flexibility you need. They can guard smaller guys. They can also guard bigger guys in a pinch. Um, so they need to draft talent, not need solely. Um, Obviously, it's a bad idea to draft two guys that will clash, and if that's the concern, then yeah, obviously you try to avoid having players that want to clash. And they need to support the coaching staff, that organization. They need to find one they believe in, and if they truly believe in it and are given no indication that their trust was ill placed, they need to roll with it and support them. And some targets, obviously Chris Paul to Atlanta is really interesting, seeing as what Chris Paul has done for other organizations. I really thought that was the destination for Dwight Howard, Chris Paul, and Carmelo Anthony a while back. I really thought that might be what happened, and it never did, and that was a bummer, because I would have thought that would be a really interesting trio right there. Joel Embiid, trying to find a way to trade for him, even if it meant trading a couple of these young guys, young shooters. I think Embiid, Trae Young could be very exciting offensively. I worry about durability there. And Al Horford, getting Al Horford back there. I think Al Horford believes he's a starter. I think the market would say he's a starter. But finding a way to get Al Horford there as a number 6, a guy to really shore up that second unit and just bring some really good veteran presence to that young squad. I'd really love to see Al Horford back there. Um, Detroit would be the 5th pick in the draft. And first thing I do, I'm the GM of the Detroit Pistons right now. I'm eliminated from the Orlando bubble. I start making plans with other teams, contacting other teams about trading Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin for assets. These guys are both very talented, although injury prone, and really deserve to be on teams that are competing. These guys deserve to be in the playoff picture, and so getting them to veteran teams that could use their they use their talents while gaining assets in return, would go a long way towards speeding up this rebuild, which has really been inevitable. They keep trying to piece together something, and I think they have a great coach in Dwayne Casey. Seeing what he did in Toronto was amazing. And if LeBron James isn't in the East, he's probably still in Toronto right now. And I think that if you put a young team there with some talent, get him some talent in there, let him cultivate it into a winner. That's the key there for that franchise. And finding a star or whatever either one of the Isaiah Thomases brought to their teams, both the Celtics and the Pistons, um, that spark that represent what that team's about. I think what Isaiah Thomas was for the recent Boston Celtics really embodied what that team was, and I was really bummed they didn't get a chance to run that back. I think there was cause for concern for that hip, and I wonder, is it Isaiah Thomas out of that system, Brad Stevens' system, or is it that there was regression after that hip injury? And the older Isaiah Thomas, for the older Pistons, he was their star, um, in consideration for the Dream Team, an all-star. So someone that could be that person, what Derrick Rose, young prime Derrick Rose was. That's what they need there in Detroit, or just someone, even if they aren't an all-time legend, someone to provide a spark, be the face of that franchise, and someone there for the long haul. That team desperately needs some sort of star power, some sort of spark to rally behind. And with the sixth pick in the NBA draft, the New York Knicks. And nothing this offseason can start without James Dolan selling the team. That is not only a trendy opinion, but it's the truth. Players don't want to play for that organization. Fans don't want to root for that organization. And frankly, I don't think James Dolan likes being the owner of the Knicks, but I also think that he's stubborn. I think he believes that he's not the problem. And if fans want to send a message to the New York Knicks and get him to sell that team, is when play resumes with fans that can attend, don't go. Don't attend home games. If that's how you want to send a message, James Dolan will have to sell the team if people don't go to home games. And that's how you control that situation. I think that that has to be priority number one for that franchise. Is James Dolan has to sell it. No stars will ever come there. You'll never be able to retain stars. Kristaps Porzingis, you lucked into that guy, and he didn't want to play for you. None of these other guys are doing anything for the organization. R.J. Barrett will likely fizzle out and flame out there, which is super unfortunate because he's such a talented player, but such a toxic organization. No continuity, no leadership, no faith. James Dolan has to go. Hiring Mark Jackson would go a long ways. Getting him in there with a new owner, a new front office, could go a long way to turning around a quick rebuild. I think Mark Jackson got an unfair shake in Golden State. He's definitely had his handprints on that dynasty. And finding a star or signing or trading for a star, they have to find someone to come there to sell the place out. Amari Stoudemire and Carmelo Anthony were the last ones to really do that. Draw the fans back. Kristaps Porzingis never really was healthy enough to really be a draw, except for when he was playing. And so, R.J. Barrett, all due respect to R.J. Barrett, R.J. Barrett has star potential, but you have to, you can't always bank on all these. This is way too young. One season under his belt. Um, you know, he you can't bank on the fact that he will be a star. You hope, but you have to keep drafting players with star potential, especially with as low as you are. You have the sixth pick. Um, there's not a ton of obvious star power at the top of this draft. Although I do have hopes for James Wiseman. I think if he ends up in Golden State, that would be really exciting. And just bringing a star there, whether it's signing it, trading for. They have been linked to Chris Paul, although I don't see Chris Paul going there willingly until James Dolan sells it. But finding a way to get Bradley Beal or Joel Embiid, I don't think that they have the assets to do that. I don't even think they could trade, 4 or 5 players from their roster that would entice either of those teams to trade, Embiid or Bradley Beal. But That's what they need there. And so next week we'll be previewing the Bulls, the Hornets, and what we believe will be the Washington Wizards. Although they've been invited to Orlando, and we're not yet sure. I assume that how they finish the season standings will be their place in the draft lottery. Okay. Yeah, we'll leave that. So something I want to talk about is we talk about in current events. We talk about things like systemic racism, and you really have to look at the root word in that. Systemic is system, and we keep saying this because we know that it's a system problem, but we're not identifying the parts of the system that are the problem. Right now we're only identifying the problem that we have within the police, but it's deeper than that. You have district attorneys that refuse to prosecute police officers. You have judges that issue longer sentences for the same crimes, uh, for black people versus white people, or people minorities in general versus white people. And that, you'll hear two different arguments when it comes to that. One, that stat's not true, and if you have stats to prove otherwise, I'd be willing to hear them both out. And the other statistic, or the other argument is that every case is handled differently, and yeah, that's true. But you know, in general, that should be equal. Those should only be outliers where, okay, his crime, while charged for that crime, was more violent than this guy. That's an outlier. In general, that crime, the punishment should be the same across the board, and with few outliers. And it doesn't seem to be that way. It seems to be across the board that crimes doled out to, or punishments doled out to minorities versus white people, that the minorities serve longer sentences, get worse punishments for the same crimes. And so identifying the system problems, judges, district attorneys, our judicial systems, you look that this police problem has been a problem for a while, the last 50 years at least, where the police have been largely unchecked um, when they commit crimes, which some do, and it's a very small portion. For the most part, police are good. A lot of those guys are in it for the right reason, to serve and protect. But unfortunately, a lot of them have taken advantage of the situation. And when they do take advantage of the situation, or they do make a mistake that results in a crime, if I shoot someone and kill them, I'm arrested right away, on the spot. And I'm forced to prove my innocence. The whole innocent until proven guilty is wrong. I'm assumed guilty, and it's up to me to prove myself innocent. And so when a police officer commits a crime, he's not arrested right away. He's not made to prove his innocence. In a lot of cases where body cam footage was not available, that was his way of protecting himself if he wasn't doing anything wrong. And so, they're held to a different standard. And unfortunately for a lot of them, the few are giving them a bad name. But the police is not the only part of the problem. It is a systemic problem. It is a system problem, and our system has been unchecked. No one there to check and see what judges are doing. Oh, you have this. You're doling out this much more punishment than this, and let's go through and review it. And that's not occurring. And your politicians have let you down. They have had the opportunity for the last 50 years to continue to fight, to make laws, bills, legislation that would keep police in check. You know, a lot of these police officers are going out into the field with less training than non potentially lethal situations. They're required more training than some police are. You know, and that's not fair. That's not fair to society. That's not fair to the police officers. It's setting them up for failure. When the gravity of the situations they're handling, we're talking, not providing them with enough training. It's unfair for them. It's really setting them up for failure as well. And that has to be fixed. And all of our politicians for the last 50 years, I should say most, but it feels like all politicians have let us down for the last 50 years, and made very little effort towards checks and balances. But that leads to an even deeper problem within the government. The government, the idea of the government is great, but there has been no one or nothing to keep politicians in check. And every time they've been exposed, they have resorted to calling being exposed treason. Things Edward Snowden did to try and expose it. Now he can't even come back to the United States, and he exposed government corruption, and he can't come back to the States, or else he'll be wanted. He'll be arrested for treason. And so that leads to a lot of distrust when you can't even trust your own government because of the politicians within it. We don't want to tear down the government. We need to hold accountable the politicians we have elected to represent us. And unfortunately, they've profited from being politicians, while the rest of us have had to pay for it. The Netflix documentary Dirty Money is fascinating, and the one that was about it wasn't the Philippines, but they exposed this government's corruption, and its biggest leader had been siphoning millions, if not billions, from his own people. They paid for his lavish lifestyle, and we're paying for these politicians' lavish lifestyles. Tell me why our EMTs, our nurses, our teachers, which are shaping the future of this country, are paid so little, yet our politicians, who make decisions for us and that have made poor decisions, have siphoned money and given it off into foreign aid for the last, you know, foreseeable, the longest I can remember, 20 years. We've been giving out foreign aid rather than doing more to help our people, homeless, um, poor communities, inner cities. There's a lot of people living in really rough situations right now that foreign aid could have gone to get them out. And when everyone is succeeding, and everyone, if everyone was off the streets, everyone was getting the help they needed and deserved, you know, um, we could do a lot more for the world if we picked each other up. We picked our own people up off the ground, get our inner cities, built back up, provide them support. There's a lot we could do to fix the world after that. But unfortunately, with the way it is now, we can't help anyone because we can't help ourselves. And the only people profiting from all this money transfer, foreign aid going to these other countries, and then us receiving foreign aid, whether mostly in the form of debt, that money isn't going to anyone except for the elite. And our politicians have become the elite. That's the problem. The elite people in our country are the politicians. Yes, there is entertainers, athletes, self-made, million billionaires in that group of elite, but the politicians should, no politician should be part of the elite, that becomes a problem, because then they're only fighting for those people. They're only fighting. They can only relate to those kind of people, and so obviously they're going to be more inclined to make a world they want to live in. And you see a lot of these ones who have encouraged rioting, not necessarily really encouraging change. They are, okay with the destruction until it comes to their neighborhoods, and then they call the police, they call private security, they arm themselves. So they're okay with it as long as it doesn't come to their neighborhoods, and that's on both sides. Don't forget that when you look back at when change happened, of who actually wanted the change, you have a lot of liberal leaders, people who call themselves a part of the cause. And the moment it comes to their neighborhood, it comes to their front yard, they want nothing to do with it. And don't forget these politicians like Joe Biden, who have been in power for 40 years, who have done nothing to help the cause. He's only jumping on this bandwagon now because it's the trendy thing to do, and it's how he believes he's going to defeat Donald Trump. But don't forget, he's been a part of this broken system for 40 years. Bernie Sanders has been a part of this broken system for 40 years. And if people think that he's been, the way he is now, the whole time he's been a politician, you're crazy. You're crazy. Hillary Clinton trashed Bernie Sanders, and the liberal left believes that Hillary Clinton is the next greatest thing, and she trashed Bernie Sanders. You can't trust any of these people. I'm not conservative at all. I don't give a shit about either political party. I want what's best for the United States. I want peace. I want equality. I want everything. I want it all. I want what this country was supposed to be, a land for the free, and it's not become that for anyone. And so the system has to change. We have to hold politicians accountable. Until we start holding politicians accountable and keep them in check, making sure that they're not increasing their net worth by 100 times while in positions of power. Who regulates and makes sure that politicians are not have no financial interest in causes they're supporting, bills they're signing, foreign aid they're giving away? Why are we allowing them to control money? Why are we allowing them to increase their net worth? That's not why you should be a politician. It should not be to become rich. It should be to make change. These people are not fighting for us. They're fighting for their own people, their own elite lifestyle. And when shit hits the fan, they are not going to be there to open their doors to you. And on the other side, it's the same thing. That guy with the mega church in Houston during the hurricanes closed the doors to the church when people needed them. And for something I wanted to bring up, I thought of a joke I heard the other day, but it really made me think. It's a joke I've known for a long time, but I thought about it the other day, and it really made me think of the mentality we have in this world. Um, I'll tell you the joke after I take a drink here. So the joke goes, um, a man gets up and goes to work. Gets in his car, drives to work, and his wife's getting up, doing her thing, cleaning up, has the news on, and the news tells a story that um, the freeway that her husband drives on every day to work, that there's a guy driving backwards. He's driving on the opposite side of the road. He's going through traffic, and so she's frantic. She calls her husband and says, honey, there's someone on blah 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 freeway driving on the wrong side of the road. And he says, baby, you won't believe this. It's not just one person. It's all of them. They're all driving backwards. They're all driving on the wrong side of the road. And if you really think about it, those kind of people exist in our day-to-day life. I've seen it when gaming. people that believe it's not they're not wrong in how they feel, even if 9 other people or 5 other people in the game tell them they're wrong and say, hey, no, you're wrong. He says, no, 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 all of you are wrong. I'm sure people have experienced that in other walks of life. I've myself have been that person, at times, gaming, in my own personal life, um, that had a hard time admitting I was wrong. And you see that now when we're talking about racial inequality. People don't think they're wrong to oppose racial equality. And even though they hear the whole world telling them they're wrong, that what they're doing isn't right, they don't believe it. They think that everyone else is wrong. And I don't know how you fix that. It seems to me like that's something people kind of have to come to terms with on their own, and how to get past that. But that's a real problem when these people that believe that their ways of life and the ways they've viewed other people, that they feel the way they view people isn't wrong, even though everyone tells them they're wrong. They sit there, no, and they'll have excuses. They'll make it biblical. They'll make it lifestyle or heritage. And those people might never change how they view that. And in that event, I don't know what you do. The only thing we the rest of us can do is continue to show support for this. Continue to drown out those people. You know, back this cause up, because you know the last thing you want to do is be on the wrong side of history right now. You know, if you feel that racial equality is not right, you're wrong. You are wrong. And if you are unwilling to accept that into your heart and believe it, not just deal with it, you have to believe it in your heart. You're part of the problem. And none of this is going to be perfect. It's important that people are corrected when they're wrong. Drew Brees, in his comments, it's important that he said them so that way it can be brought to light and something done about it. And I hope if I say something insensitive that it's brought to my attention so I can not do that again. And it's up to us to not do it in the first place. It starts in our heart. Looking back at things said, not even just you know, about all cultures, all the horribly insensitive things said about it, it's up to us to make sure that we don't have those thoughts. Not just not saying them, or not just saying them in public, but not even saying them in private. If you're willing to say it in private, then does that not reflect your character? And then for free talk, um, I only had planned talking about the UFC fights last night. I only saw the Mike Perry and Dustin Poirier fight. The Mike Perry fight, man, talk about a brawler, man. Like, he threw everything he had at that guy. Really, really proven that you know he doesn't need anyone in his corner. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he wants to do. And then Dustin Poirier, man, um, absolute performance he put on. Really all 5 rounds, not backing down, throwing absolute haymakers. It really proves to how strong that guy is. That he has competed with Khabib, the likes of Khabib, um, Cowboy Cerrone. But that division's absolutely stacked. I don't think maybe he gets one more shot at Khabib if he continues to win. I believe he'll be the number 2 contender. That he will eventually move up to number 2 contender, and then we'll likely get a shot. But I did miss the rest of the fights. I heard it was a really good card altogether. Um, but really exciting seeing Dustin Poirier do what he did, and you know, hats off to Dan Hooker. He absolutely fought valiantly in that. Tried to trade blow for blow. But you look at
looks like they picked the
what Dustin Poirier did over 5 rounds, and it's not hard to see why the judges scored in his favor. News just broke that Cam Newton signed that 1-year deal. I definitely think that's interesting because he doesn't strike me as someone who fits Belichick's system. Definitely think it's cool though. Belichick has the mind and the ability, I think, to change and maybe experiment with something new. Cam Newton, I don't think, has more than another year or two before we start to see a drop off because of injuries. He's just taken absolute abuse over his career, and that definitely speaks to the play style. But definitely interesting to see that. I think that definitely, if Cam Newton plays, I definitely think that they win more games than if he doesn't, as long as he stays healthy. I don't know that we've seen a player like that in Bill Belichick's system. Well, that's all I had for tonight. I do have 3 more teams next week to try to fix in the off season. We'll have another UFC card, although I don't remember next weekend's being really all that. I doubt that they'd want to put a banger on 4th of July when people are really not going to be watching UFC. They'll be out doing stuff with their family. So the week after that, though, is a really big card. Usman versus Burns. That's going to be a freaking lightning show, man. I cannot wait for that. And so, if you guys have any things you'd like to see on the podcast or talked about in the podcast, please always feel free to stop by, comment, shoot us a shout out on Twitter, DM us, um, and I'd love to hear what people want to talk about. So, in the meantime, I'd like to remind us all that we are all in this together, all of us.